Okay, so right off the bat, this is going to be a different kind of video, as you could probably tell from the title. When Marvel Rivals was coming out, and I heard that it would be an official Marvel Games game, I thought that it would probably be its best quality. Not necessarily because the MCU is the best thing ever, but more so because Disney loves to throw money at Marvel. And a company that has low expectations because, let's be honest, no one was expecting a banger of a game from Marvel Games and NetEase for all companies, mixed with a pretty close to unlimited budget. It kind of makes sense for Marvel Rivals to slap like it does, you know? But let's slip to the quote unquote other side for a second, because the MCU has not been having the best time post Endgame. Even huge fans are not as excited when these movies come out as they used to be. In their scramble to try and catch lightning in a bottle again, they've struggled to get out of their own damn way and are far overcomplicating things, even when their actors getting into various scandals aren't. There's also, understandably, an uptick in the criticism of the MCU, and while most of it I do feel is warranted, things like MCU movies having become their own self fulfilling genre at this point, and the issues of sameness across what should be vastly different movies. But there are a couple of things that I don't agree with, and one of them is when we talk about dialogue in the MCU. Now, I know what your initial reaction probably is to that. Like, what are you talking about? How could you think that? Have you seen the last few movies? And the answer is yes. I rewatched Iron Man 2, the good one, and the first Captain America movie and the 2012 Avengers movie. And the cheesy dialogue has always been in the room, folks. This is not a new or sudden turn of events or takes. In the first Avengers movie, there are widely hailed scenes that everybody likes, and I'm sure you've seen them all over TikTok. The introduction of the Hulk, the argument in Banner's laboratory. There are tons of well-written scenes in the early MCU movies. But you know what else is in those movies? Lines like, "We need a plan of attack." I have a plan. Attack. Or, "That man is playing Galaga. He thought we wouldn't notice." Or, "There's only one God, ma'am, and he doesn't dress like that." There have always been unbelievably cheesy lines and incredibly corny moments in the MCU. It's not like they magically started appearing after Thanos got turned into a dust bunny. Another thing that I see a lot of people saying is that the MCU never has serious moments without them being undercut by some quirky joke. But in the first Avengers movie, Hulk is shot like a horror monster when he first appears and starts chasing Black Widow around the helicarrier. But when the plane shows up to fire at him, the plane goes, "Target acquired." And then Hulk turns around and they go, "Target angry, target angry." That is the type of dialogue that people would flame the MCU for writing nowadays, but it's always been there. And to be fair, there are people who have always thought the dialogue was too cheesy, but this many movies deep, it's obvious that the majority was once in the MCU's favor, and that's why the movies were so popular. So, what changed? Listen, I'm not here to act like the movies are all the same and nothing's different, yada yada. They clearly are, right? Disney has further tangled what already seemed to be a pretty complicated upper management process that makes making one of these movies more difficult, draining, and confusion. But I think the real difference is something that has been said many times before. The MCU is getting too wrapped around itself. The MCU has become a genre unto itself, and that's not at all a good thing for the quality of these movies. The first Avenger movie benefits from the fact that it oscillates between being a spy movie and a horror flick and a stylish, quippy romp and a dramatic soldier war movie with all the shield stuff. And most importantly, across all of these subgenres, it's always a superhero film. We go from the superhero war story of S.H.I.E.L.D. to the superhero horror story of Hulk to these, you know what I mean? Like it maintains that feel of a comic book come to life. And comic books have a bunch of different genres. They're inspired by different things because it's a storytelling medium, not a genre unto itself. Superhero film is not a genre of movie. If your movie has a superhero in it, it's implicitly a superhero film. That does not change the genre of the movie. And that's a big problem with the MCU is they have essentially tried to make the concept of superheroes into its own genre, and that doesn't work. But how does this all connect with Marvel Rivals? Well, one thing that I've heard people say about Marvel Rivals is sometimes the dialogue between heroes is corny or cringy, or like certain heroes' voices and line delivery is grating or like, too lulz te random for them. And I'm always like, well, yeah, it's supposed to be. Squirrel Girl's supposed to be kind of cringe and cheesy and like campy as hell. She's supposed to be like that. Like that's how she's supposed to be written. It was supposed to be kind of cringe in the original Avengers movie as well. Comic books are campy. They're over the top. They're cheesy. These are stories that have existed since the 50s. Like, there's a certain level of cheesy corniness that is intrinsic to how a comic book functions. They've always been over the top. They've always been a little bit like, okay, what are we doing here? That has always been the feel of a comic book. And in fact, when comic books started to drift away from that, it was noticeable. And it's an era of comics that a lot of people make fun of now. When comics went super grimdark, you had years and years of people wishing that they would stop being so dramatic because people got tired of that cringy, cheesy Saturday morning feel. But that's what a comic book is. For example, any comic book nerd worth their salt that I know doesn't like when people try to make Superman grim and brooding. A lot of people hate the Zack Snyder take on Superman for that reason. Man of Steel was otherwise a pretty decent movie, but Superman being like so emo and goth is just not the feel of Superman. That's not the character. He's a beacon of hope for all of the people that he saves. He always stops the bad guy. He saves everyone because he's Superman. It's not a subversive character because superheroes were originally basically modern fairy tale characters. Now, obviously, those characters have evolved over the years, so you have to approach them differently. And I do think that there is meant to be a marriage between the original campiness and the more serious storytelling of the modern era. But that doesn't mean that you can fully detach yourself from the campiness. And I think the first Avengers does that kind of perfectly. And so does Marvel Rivals for one big reason that the MCU has forgotten. They play it straight. They lean into the skid. That scene where they reveal the helicarrier for the first time and Rogers has to give Fury $10 because he's like, as a reference and a callback to something Fury said earlier, the focus on the dialogue, all of the moments of dramatic one-liners before jumping out of a plane. That's the type of shit that happens in comic books. That's how comic books are written and structured. And yes, it is a little cheesy. Yes, it is a little campy and it's a little fucking cringe, but it's supposed to be. That is part of what makes it a comic book. And just because that doesn't appeal to everybody does not mean that it's bad. And I think that Marvel Rivals excels in this. These are stories about a giant green rage monster and a frozen super soldier from World War II. the shit is gonna be a little bit ridiculous. You know what I mean? And I think part of the reason that Marvel Rivals excels in these things is because it's a video game. You can show how wacky and stretchy Mr. Fantastic is. You can have your extremely niche characters like Squirrel Girl or Jeff the Land Shark, and people are clamoring for Paste Pot Pete to be put in the game. A lot of motherfuckers don't even know who that is. You know what I mean? And I think of the reason that people are openly campaigning for these goofy little characters is because the game leans into it. Their openness for characters like that is apparent. The references and the dialogue that is so wonderfully cheesy to me means that they are embracing the lovely world and universe that the game takes place in. And those are the types of things that I really, really get excited about when it comes to this game, because to me, it shows a passion for comic books, not for the MCU, not for the Disney version of Marvel, but for the comic books that a lot of us read when we were younger and still read nowadays. And I think that having a passion that is that core to the identity of the game, I think it's a sign that the game will be around for a long time to come. But that's all that I had for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I know this is a little bit different. There's kind of no lore for me to really cover right now. We're mostly just waiting for the Friday video, which will be the new patch notes for when the Thing and the Human Torch get entered into the game, and we will get the second half of Season 1. If you like the video, like the video, and if you want to stay up to date, you can subscribe and join us on our hike to 500 subs. Thank you all so much for listening once again. And until the next time I see you, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people.